Brexit deal on the table as well. We'll be having a look at that. It does involve staying in the single market and having a 7-year emergency break on freedom of movement. So I'd like to know whether you think this could be a reasonable compromise. Would it satisfy the levers? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On FM, online, on your mobile and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, Russia will be allowed to compete at next month's Olympic Games despite the country's widespread state-sponsored doping scandal. The International Olympic Committee has decided against banning the country, leaving it to individual sports federations to decide if Russia's athletes can compete. Speaking via a translator, Russia's sports minister Vitaly Mutko says he's pleased with the IOC's decision.
We are very grateful that when the committee considered the right of each athlete, they realized that those who are full of integrity have the right to participate.
Meanwhile, the International Tennis Federation is the first to say it's happy for all Russian players to compete at the Rio Games. So far, Russia's sending 7 players to the event, which begins in 12 days. Former Olympian Brian Smith, who competed for Great Britain in the 1996 Games, has told LBC the IOC has failed sport.
The Olympics, which is, the biggest sporting event there is, for the IOC to do this, I think this is damaging more than helping any sport in the world.
In other headlines this hour, police in Germany are questioning a man after a woman was killed with a machete. 2 other people were injured in the attack just outside Stuttgart. LBC's correspondent in Germany, Aaron Tilton, has been speaking to police investigating the attack.
He was a 21-year-old Syrian migrant who actually applied for asylum here recently. Police have been quite quick to say they don't believe there is a terrorist connection here. They're saying rather that this person, this migrant, was known to them for being rather violent and actually injuring people in the past.
Police investigating the death of a boy at a water park are questioning a man and a woman. The 5-year-old died at Bosworth Water Park in Warwickshire. 4 girls as young as 15 are being questioned by police following violence in central London. It follows disorder at a fast food restaurant in Marble Arch last week. 2 boys aged 16 and 17 and an 18-year-old man have been arrested and bailed. Kent police say traffic heading to the port of Dover has returned to almost normal levels this evening. The long tailbacks yesterday and today were caused by French border officials increasing security checks on this side of the channel, but there are warnings the delays could return over the next few weeks. LBC weather, sunny spells continuing into this evening, dry overnight, a low of 12 degrees. Tomorrow continuing dry and sunny, a seasonal high of 22 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Philip Chrysikos.
From the LBC Travel Centre, good evening, I'm Laura Cress. In Chingford, Old Church Road still blocked in both directions after an accident earlier around Mount Avenue. Looking at the south of London in Lee, Burnt Ash Hill, that's shut in both directions after an accident at Westhorn Avenue. It's also causing some delays now on the South Circular. Looking at the Port of Dover, the A2 and A20 now getting back to normal, some slight queues of about a mile. It's also looking very slow at the port itself. On the rails, there may be some cancellations and delays on Great Northern trains in and out of King's Cross due to a staff shortage. Keep your updates coming. More travel here on LBC in 15 minutes.
This is LBC, London.
Landlords. You can get landlord insurance with Direct Line from just £125. Can your insurance do that? 10% of customers paid this or less November 2015 to April 2016. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
You'll be pleased to know that thanks to an ever-expanding network, you can now charge your electric car
at over 10,000 charge points and at over 96% of motorway services.
Meaning you can drive the length and breadth of Britain.
For more information on electric cars, visit goultralow.com.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Clive Bull. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC.
And a very good evening to you. I'm Clive Bull here on LBC with you till 9. Later on we talk about pay and conditions for workers in 2016 after this week's damning report by MPs which said that workers at Sports Direct were not treated like human beings, with conditions described as appalling Is this a one-off case, or do you think that other workers in Britain are being exploited and mistreated? We'll have the latest on the chaos in Dover. Could the difficulties in getting into France be related to Brexit? And Russian athletes have escaped a blanket ban from the IOC for the Rio Olympic Games, but is that the right decision? 0345 6060 973 is the number at LBC. Later on as well, the Travel Hour. Bob Atkinson and John Warrington join me for the Travel Hour on our panel to give you advice on holidays and travel. That's coming up at 8 o'clock. No doubt we'll be talking a little bit about travelling from Dover as well. But we start with Brexit. And there are reports in the papers today that a possible Brexit deal might be on the table, which would involve staying in the single market, paying some kind of fee, Britain having a 7-year emergency break on freedom of movement. I'd like to know what your gut reaction to that idea is. If you voted for Brexit, is that the kind of thing you had in mind? Could this be a reasonable compromise that satisfies some of the leavers, some of the remainers? It's a sort of the kind of deal that perhaps might be a consensus. What do you think? 0345 6060 973. So Britain could be offered this option of imposing a 7-year emergency break. That would be on immigration as part of a deal that would keep Britain in the single market. Senior British ministers and the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson are said to be determined to keep Britain in the single market, which allows tariff-free trade. But the other half of that, the freedom of movement, well, Italy and Holland are supposedly making approving noises of this idea. A leading Dutch MEP said, if the rights of EU citizens now living in the UK can be guaranteed permanently by the UK government, then I think we can look at some form of emergency break on free movement of labour. So how would you feel about this kind of deal? A fair compromise? Is this an example of Brexit means Brexit? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Let's talk first to Sybil Cash, Conservative MP for Stone. Sybil, good evening to you.
Good evening.
I think I know what your answer is going to be to this, but how would you feel about such a deal?
Well, it's not even on the cards, and for one very simple reason. The Prime Minister has said Brexit means Brexit. When people voted, they were voting on an alternative question. Do you want to remain in or do you want to leave the European Union? Leaving the European Union means repealing the act called the European Communities Act 1972, on which all the laws, every single one of them, and also every single treaty actually depends. And one of those is to do with the Single European Act, which is what dealt with the single market. So it's just a non-runner. And there's a lot of talk going on here, but I'm afraid some people are misunderstanding what took place in the vote. And it's just a nonsense to suggest that when all the laws go from the European Union and all the treaties go, that somehow or other you can then continue with the single market.
Well, why couldn't you? Why couldn't you repeal that act and then just set up some new agreements?
It's not as simple as that, and it's not possible. The fact is that we leave the European Union and we have to repeal this 1972 Act. That is as simple as that. However, that is not to say we won't continue to trade with the European Union. You don't have to be inside the European Union to trade with it. So outside the European Union, because that's where we would be, the others would remain in, and they would then be in a single market, and we would trade with them.
But why couldn't we be in the single market anyway, though? Why couldn't we just set up... we could throw all that out and then start again and join the single market again, couldn't we?
No, it doesn't work like that.
Well, it could do.
It could for a radio programme, if you like, but it's not the real world.
Well, none of it is the real world at the moment, is it? We just don't know what Brexit could mean.
We do, because we had a referendum, which is one of the most historic votes ever in this country. And in that, and the government has said that, and the Prime Minister has said Brexit means Brexit. And she means by that leaving the European Union. And you can't then do what's described by your interviewer or by whoever it was that introduced the programme and then say, oh, well, we can do a compromise. It doesn't work like that. Could I make another
Well, you say it doesn't work like this because you don't want it to work like that, but you could come out of Europe and then make new similar arrangements, surely.
I'm terribly sorry, but actually, I don't like to use the word nonsense, but that is what it is. If you have left the European Union according to the vote that's been taken, you leave the European Communities Act 1972 by repeal of that act, and that means you get rid of all the laws and you get rid of all the treaties. But could I make another practical point?
Please.
By the way, that also includes free movement, because that goes out as well. And then we bring in our own domestic legislation to deal with the control of the numbers of immigration. So we deal with that. But one last point I would like to make is this. It's very important. Everyone talks about this single market as if it's been a tremendous bonanza. Yes, we will continue to trade with that single market, but I want to make a simple point which I made clear during my campaign during the referendum, and it goes like this. And these figures come from the Office of National Statistics. They're not a sort of Eurosceptic rant. They are actually about the Office of National Statistics' own figures. And it goes, and the House of Commons Library. We run a deficit in our trading with the other 27 member states at the moment, because we're still in the European Union at the moment, and we continue to be in there until repeal. However, our deficit with those 27 is £62 billion a year, and that is imports, exports, goods and services. Germany, however, makes a surplus with the same 27 member states of over 82 billion a year, and that goes to show you that actually it is not a good deal for the United Kingdom, it is for Germany. And yet, our surplus with the rest of the world, with the same goods and services and the same imports and exports, is 31 billion, and it rose by 8 billion last year alone. So it's a very good way to demonstrate the deficiencies of the European single market for us and the advantages of being outside.
Well, the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, is said to be very much in favour of staying in the single market, but coming out of Europe.
Language. It may be a matter of language. All I can say to you is this, that when we voted to leave, and as the Prime Minister quite correctly has said, Brexit means Brexit, and I'm 100% behind her. And I can only say this, that language does get a little bit distorted in this, but actually the single market is a thing called the Single European Act, which is one of the treaties that was passed in 1986, which I was in Parliament when it was going through. And the bottom line is that all those treaties are going to be what we call denounced. They'll be left behind. We will repeal them when we repeal the 1972 Act. But I think what may be misunderstood is that we will continue to trade with that single market, but we won't physically be in it. We'll be outside it. That's the distinction that needs to be made.
And what about the freedom of movement then? Because even if all of those the things are indeed repealed, we are left with a problem to solve, because there are people here who are EU citizens who won't know what their situation is, and vice versa. So we're going to have to come to some arrangement.
That is a very, very important point, and I have to say I was in the Brexit debate on ITV the other day, and this came up, and the position is very clear. Yes, we will leave all the laws and all the treaties, as I've said, by the repeal of this 72 Act. But, and this is really important, we will also have our own immigration laws, and when we do that, we will be, and this is all going to be part of the discussions, these negotiations which will take place, to ensure that, and Theresa May has already mentioned this, and she's, on the focus on this one, that we will be giving other member states residents, the people who live in this country who come from the EU, a continuing right to remain. They will have acquired rights. and they will be allowed to remain, and we will have similar arrangements with regard to our citizens who live in those countries as well.
But we're going to have to negotiate that, aren't we?
Yeah, but actually, do you know something? I think it's less a matter of negotiation than plain common sense, because there is a huge amount of reason why we would want to be able to ensure that although we will reduce the numbers, in terms of those who are already here, this is the difference. It's not about the future, it's about those who are already here, that those people will get equivalent rights as we would expect of our nationals who are in the other member states. And I think that that's just a common sense solution, but it won't be as it is now, because obviously we'll bring in our own domestic Westminster legislation, which will provide for a proper level of immigration, which at the moment is out of control. And as a matter of fact, you heard Theresa May making also some very, very positive remarks about the necessity
Yes.
of bringing the numbers.
She hasn't quite laid it out like you, though. You make it sound like it's all kind of completely clear and obvious, but she hasn't said much of this.
Could I say only this? I mean, I've been campaigning on this issue for 30 years.
Indeed.
I've been on the European Scrutiny Committee, and I'm chairman of it now. And all I can say is that what I'm doing is making it crystal clear that these things are governed by certain rules, which are leave means